So what is research? We have a lot of this stuff flying around in our culture right now, and it's a very strong influence in education, so definitely worth taking a look at. Now, to get a definition for the word, we're going to break it into three distinct parts, and then expand each of those parts into three full words, giving us reshaping earthen chatter. So what is research? It is reshaping earthen chatter. Let's look at the implications of this. When you perform research, you don't see what actually happens, you see what's happening from your perception. So whether you're conscious of it or not, reshaping the events based on your understanding, your thoughts, emotions, and actions, your experiences in life, and then you're making conclusions on what happened. So you're not actually seeing what happened, you're making an interpretation of what happened. You're reshaping it. And what are you looking at? You're looking at the earth. The earth is communicating all the time. There's expressions all around you, the animals, the trees, the air, everything that we experience, and it's all chattering. And this is the problem. We don't understand what the earth is saying. Why? Because in the Garden of Eden, we ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and we created our own language, our own spiritual language based on what we think is good and evil. However, the earth is still speaking the original language based on God's knowledge. So we no longer understand what the earth is saying. So what do we do about it? We reshape the chatter into something we understand. But that's an interpretation of what's happening. We don't know what's happening. So we're just reshaping it into something that's completely irrelevant. So in the end, we can conclude that researching what happened creates a theory about what happened. And that is the essence of human research. So let's press a little deeper. How is research created? And it follows a very simple process. First, you must reshape what happened. So let's say, for example, you're looking at a geyser that's shooting up out of the ground, and you're going to research this geyser. You look at the geyser, and in a minute, it fires out of the ground 3 times. Now, there's your first problem. You write the 3 on the paper, right? 3 times a minute. But did the number 3 shoot out of the ground? No, the water did. But you just made an interpretation and wrote it down, and you're now going to make conclusions on your interpretation, your number 3. So right away, you've reshaped what happens, you made it into a totally different reality, a number 3 on the piece of paper, and you're now going to draw conclusions on that. That is a reinterpretation of what happened. So then, once you have your number on the paper 3 times a minute, you have to figure out, so how is this happening? Where are the pressures and the forces that are causing this geyser to shoot out of the ground 3 times a minute? And you don't know. But what you're going to do is you're going to use the 3 times a minute, and you're going to start making conclusions on how that would happen 3 times a minute. So now you're 2 levels deep on your interpretation. But you don't stop there. Once you come up with some theory of how it's happening, then you've got to go further. You've also got to reshape the why. You don't know why this geyser's shooting up out of the ground, so you just start fabricating things, and you might try to make connections somewhere, but you're now 3 levels deep on your interpretive creations. So you're really, really far from what actually happened, how it actually happened, and why it's actually happening. So the point then we have to conclude is, why do all this? There's a very simple reason. There's only one person who knows why something happened, how it happened, and what actually is happening. And that would be the one who created that event. So when we research the what, how, and why, what we're really trying to do is reshape them so that it looks like we're the cause. Because if you know what happened, how it happened, and why it happened, well, then you're God. And that's the deep underlying motive of all human research. So we can see then that human research is not about what happened. It's about revealing human nature. We want to be God. That's why we ate the fruit in the Garden of Eden, and that's why we do everything, and research is included in that. We research because we want to be God, and we know that only God can tell people what happened, how it happened, and why it happened. And that is our motive in research. So then why create research? If it's just about placing ourselves in God's position in the world, maybe we should just throw it out, right? Well, no, it's important. in this fallen world. First, it's important because we need to remain inconclusive. We don't want to make conclusions. If you started making conclusions about yourself, about the world that we live in, about the problems that are everywhere, if you started making conclusions, that would be very uncomfortable. So research makes sure that there's all this conflicting information out there to keep you inconclusive. Because if you started making conclusions, that would be bad. Additionally, research assures that we will remain indecisive. And this is classic because researchers themselves, they make all this research, they come up with these, what they call conclusions, and then they hand it off to people to make decisions about how to make it relevant. They don't want to make it relevant because they know it's not relevant. And this is all of us. It's not just professional researchers that do this. We all create our conclusions about life, but then we don't actually decide how to apply them. And anytime we do even make the slightest attempt, it becomes very clear how irrelevant our research is to the world. Why? Because remember, there's two languages going on. Creation has the original language, based on the knowledge of God. We have our own theoretical, worthless knowledge, but neither of those two languages match up. So we can't decide what to do with our theories based in the world because it doesn't work. It doesn't work together. Our language and creation's language, as it's based on God, do not interface. But ultimately, the motive of research is to make sure we remain ignorant. We don't know anything. However, when we ate the fruit in the Garden of Eden, we were deluded into the realization that we think we know everything now. We know what is fully good and what is fully evil. So research fills our world with all this conflicting information and all these amazing discoveries so that we don't have to face the reality that we actually know nothing. It keeps us ignorant of our ignorance. So research isolates human beings from their spiritual ignorance. So who creates all this research? What kind of human being even goes in to the study of research? And remember, this is not just professional researchers. Every human being is a researcher. And the reason we do it, the reason we create it, the person who creates it is one believing their God. If you think you can figure out what's happening, how it happened, and why it's happening, well, then you're God. Because only the who creates the why, how, and what. If you can do it, if you can path it all out very clearly, this is what happened, this is how it happened, this is why it happened, everybody knows what you're saying. You're saying you're God. And you're displaying that because you want to show people that you're God. You know. You have the insight. You can carve the wisdom-driven path of what's happening in the world around you, the motives that are causing it to happen. Why and how is all laid bare before you. Well, you're God and you're displaying that, and you're expecting recognition of that. It's a delusion. Everybody knows you're not God, but we want to be God. That's why we ate the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, and we're still pursuing that same futile end, and research is one of the ways that we do that. So research, at a very basic level, it creates a path that leads back through the events of our world and reveals the Creator. We want to place ourselves in that position. So if you create the what, how, and why, we think that will lead back to you. So we're trying to bump God aside as the who, and we're trying to place ourselves as the who knows the why, how, and what. And that's the real motive behind every human being's research of the earthen chatter around us.